Hello, everybody. Last week, you read information on several different models of the reading brain and ways to picture what happens in the brain as it's reading. I wanted to add another model into the mix because this is a really, really simple one, I think, and really easy one to understand. And this is one that we use a lot in Baltimore County during professional developments. We use often a series of professional development modules called the LETTERS modules, and LETTERS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. It's a series of 12 modules, and these were created by Dr. Louisa Moats, and they're outstanding if you ever have an opportunity to participate in a LETTERS module. But this processor system of the brain is one that is used throughout those modules and referred to often. So I wanted to share it with you because it is a really simplistic way of thinking of what happens in the brain. So here's how it goes. In our brain, there are 4 different processing systems that work as we are reading. The very first one that develops is our phonological processor, and that's not a surprise. As we've been saying, that's the foundation of the foundational skills, is that we develop a propensity for hearing sounds in words, the sounds in our oral language, and that starts with first we hear sentences, and then we hear words, and then within words we hear individual syllables, and then we hear onset rhyme, and then we hear the individual sounds that make up words. So that's that whole auditory system that needs to develop, and that's our phonological processor. Then the next one that comes into play is our orthographic processor. And our orthographic processor is our visual processor, and that's where we recognize print when we see it. And the word part graph in there means to write, so it's all about the print system. So when our orthographic processor develops, we start to be able to recognize different letters and letters that always go together and spelling patterns that occur in words, and we can start to recognize different word parts, such as prefixes or suffixes or roots. And when these two systems start to work together, our phonological processor and our orthographic processor work together, then we develop our phonics system. Okay, so it's through our phonics system that we can get words off the page and we can decode. But that's all the two processors will do, is they'll be able to help us understand that we've seen a word that we recognize. But then, in order to get any meaning out of that word, we need our meaning processor. Okay, so now suppose we have the word spoiled in text. So our phonological processor is going to see that word and it's going to think, I recognize those sounds, sp, oil, d. The orthographic processor is going to say, I recognize that blend, the SP blend, I recognize the diphthong oi, I recognize the ending ed, and then the meaning processor is going to pick that up as the word spoiled. And our meaning processor holds our definitions. But the meaning processor is also going to think, but I know several definitions for the word spoiled, and I'm not quite sure which one we're talking about here. So the meaning processor is going to go through its little file of all the definitions that it has for the word spoiled. But that's not going to help us to get the meaning. We need our context processor. And our context processor helps us to understand how that word is being used. So it's going to take a look at the context. So are we talking about meat or vegetables that have been in the refrigerator too long? Are we talking about a child or a pet that's been spoiled? Or are we talking about spoiled plans? So the context is going to pull all that together for us. Okay, so these 4 processors have to work together in order for reading and comprehension to happen. If any of the processors is not developed and is not developed fully, the whole system is going to fall apart and we're not going to have effective reading and effective comprehension. So when we're thinking about students who might be struggling, this is the reason why we want to try to pinpoint what are they struggling with so that we can figure out which processor is being involved so that we can really target that processor and work with it intensely. And when all of the processors are working together and they're working well and they're working like a fine oiled machine, what we end up with is fluency and fluent reading. And as we know, fluent reading will lead to more effective comprehension. Okay, so that's the four-part processor model. As I said, it's simple and it's easy to understand. So I wanted to share that model with you guys too as part of our discussion of the brain. So now going forward in this module, here's what you're going to do. You're going to watch some segments of a really great video that was produced by Reading Rockets called Reading and the Brain. I've pulled out some of the most interesting segments for you to watch. So watch that video, enjoy that information. Then I've supplied you with an article on poverty and the developing brain, and we've talked about how poverty can be a factor in developing reading, but this article is going to talk about how poverty can actually affect the brain and how the brain develops. It's a very interesting field of study. Then you're going to do a little reflection for me on the information that you've learned in this module, and then this week you're going to read Chapter 7, in instructing students who have literacy problems. And this is now going to move us into the area of talking about, okay, we get it, the kids are having trouble. Now what do we do? How do we effectively instruct them? So you're going to be reading some important principles for reading instruction this week and responding to that discussion board. Okay, so I will talk to you guys soon.